intro. Good morning, everyone. I'm Martina. That's
Good
Brittany.
morning.
Oh, yes.
Morning.
I'm Martina. I'm one of the founders of You Had Me at Black. I'm currently based in Brooklyn, New York, and I grew up in New Jersey. And I have a lot of family in the Atlanta area. My parents used to live in Jonesboro. My grandma's in Rex. My uncle's in Stockbridge. So I be down there from time to time.
I'm Brittany. I'm another co-founder, currently based in Brooklyn, grew up in Jersey. Me and Martina's sisters, so same thing. We have family in Atlanta. I also went to school down in Atlanta. I went to Spelman. So I know Atlanta very well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so grateful and excited that you guys are here.
So happy to be here.
Question number one. Go ahead, number one. Who's number one?
Me. Hi, my name is Kamora.
Hi, Kamora.
Kamora of Shaw. Titles are important when creating narrative. We will be creating narratives and they must have a title. What made you guys come up with the title You Had Me Black?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, a few things to think about when you're coming up with a title, right? You want a title that's going to be memorable. You want something that pulls people in. You want something that when people hear it, they can kind of get a sense of what it's about without obviously giving it away. And you want it to be a little bit creative. And You Had Me at Black is actually something that a friend of mine came up with. It's actually a saying that she said to me one day because we were getting lunch together. And she was like, girl, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, I don't know. I just want to help Black people. And she was like, you had me at Black. And I was like, I'm going to do something with that one day. Like, let's hold on to that. And so it was a few years after she kind of gave me that in a conversation that Brittany and I came up with the podcast idea. But we went with it for the podcast because for podcasts specifically, there are millions of podcasts out there. And you really do want to find a way to stand out, right? When people are like searching through all the list of podcasts, you want something that they'll be like, ooh, that sounds interesting. Let me listen. And we knew our podcast was about Black stories. So we felt like it was something that was really catchy, that would draw people in, and people would know from the name that it's about Black people and it's about Black things. And so it's actually worked really well for us.
Okay, great. That was a great answer. Thank you so much, Martina. The things I captured from that answer is that when we create our projects, we really need to make sure that they are memorable, it pulls people in, and it's creative. So that's just the title, y'all. Like, we really need to listen to this wisdom and take that in. Let's move on to question number two.
My name is who or what's the inspiration for this organization and how long did it take to reach this point of success?
So that's a good question. An inspiration, we actually have two different inspirations for each other. My inspiration with You Had Me at Black. So outside of You Had Me at Black, I'm a writer and a director. And I was just very, very frustrated seeing what kind of stories are out there for Black people. I grew up performing, so going to auditions and such, it was just always the same roles. It was just so annoying. I just wanted Black people to be seen as complete. You know, I want us to be able to show all our emotions without being labeled some stereotype, and I wanted to be able to do it in a safe space. That was my inspiration.
Yeah, and my inspiration, similarly, it was actually, we started You Had Me at Black in 2016, and that was a time that was kind of similar to the summer we're having now. A lot of conversations about race and police brutality and young Black people being shot by police, and seeing the way that the news vilified them, right? Like made these very innocent people into demons, trying to like go through their old Facebook photos and trying to find pictures of them doing very harmless things and spinning a story to make it seem like we deserved that kind of treatment. And it clicked for me the importance of the media and the stories that we hear about ourselves. Because if you're always hearing things and it's like you're being labeled as bad, you're being labeled as a troublemaker, you're being labeled as a thug, you're being labeled as lazy, you're being labeled as not smart, we absorb that. You know, and we grow up and we've grown up hearing those things. And so it's something where I was inspired to create something that showed much more than that, right? Where we had control of our stories. We told our stories in our way. We were allowed to be 100% who we are without labels. And I thought that was something at the time I wasn't seeing anywhere else. And so that was my inspiration for it.
Thank you so much, ladies, for your response. Brittany, I think what really jumped out for me is that you said that this came from a place of frustration, right? And looking for safety. And I think that all of us, we live in South Atlanta. Like, our community has been through so much. Our Wendy's, right, is knocked down because of a bad shooting that took place. We're virtual learning, and sometimes our internets go out. Like, where there's so many disparities and so many things that people forget about us. And it's really, really important that we use our frustrations to use it to be positive. So embrace the frustrations that we have as students or people, Black people in South Atlanta, and share your story. So thank you, Brittany, for sharing that. Martina, I think what you really, really said about news vilifying us and having these negative labels, and then we absorb that, right? So whether we know it or don't, we absorb these things. So it's really, really important that we take these words of advice. This is our life, this is our stories, and we have the right to share it the way we want to. So be encouraged. All right, let's move on to number 3.
Hi, my name is Michaela. Our project driving question is, how do we heal ourselves by sharing our own stories? Why is it important to have this platform for Black people to share their stories?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you, Michaela. So, I mean, kind of building off of what we were just talking about, you know, and this, us absorbing what we're see through the media and believing things that, you know, some folks have an agenda, right? There are people who really are trying to not uplift Black folks, especially young Black folks, and they really are trying to bring us down. And they do that through a lot of the things that we see in the media. And so we think about us collectively as a community, as a people, hearing stories and telling stories is healing, just because it's kind of like undoing all these years of hearing things that aren't necessarily true about us, or things that we didn't create for ourselves, right? So that is one way in which sharing stories is healing. It's just seeing yourself in a new light. It's seeing an alternative to what you're used to. You might have grown up hearing just by watching regular news, regular television, movies, and things like that. But then on an individual level,
I want to
yeah, go ahead.
That point. I feel like we don't realize the power of media and how it can subconsciously affect our decisions, affect how we view ourselves and view others. Lack of representation has proven in studies to hurt self-esteem in Black and brown bodies, especially children. And just to see yourself represented can just do wonders. It's just you hear it all the time. You see someone in a TV show and you're like, oh, they were a doctor on this TV show. I can be a doctor. It can just inspire so many young people.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one way in which it's healing. It kind of heals us from, because those narratives really do create trauma, right? It's traumatic for us to always be told negative things about ourselves, and then to be able to see us in new ways. That's healing in and of itself. But on the individual level, you know, there's something really powerful if somebody's gone through something in their lives that might be more challenging for them to talk about. They might have a lot of shame about what happened to them, or what they experienced, or what they encountered, or what they did. Being able to talk about it in a space that is safe, that is affirming, that, you know, isn't judgmental, is very healing because it allows them to kind of process what happened to them and find the words to talk about it in a way that kind of releases them. So that's feedback that we get from some of the people who have been on the show. Like they've texted us and been like, yo, this healed me. Like I'd never told anyone this happened to me. Or I'd never talked about this before, but you gave me a space to really think about what happened and how I can come out of it. And so that's really healing and powerful too. I don't know if you want to add to that, Brittany.
No, that's just so true. It's just when you are surrounded by people who go through the same experiences as you and you're listening to these stories, it's affirming. You just don't feel alone. And I think that's just really helpful.
Yeah, I'll let you know that, we're not alone, and anything you've gone through, there are other people out there who have experienced it too. And so by sharing all the different kinds of stories from all different kinds of Black people on the podcast, it kind of lets people know when they listen that no matter how you present, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done, there's someone else who's kind of has a similar story out there.
Yeah.
Thank
that was
you.
a long-winded answer.
No, that was amazing. Thank you. And I feel like that was like the heart of what we're really trying to get at. Like, why are we doing this? And some things I really want to highlight is that we're undoing all things some things that we didn't create for ourselves. That's a big deal, right? And we've talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so the students know about the importance of self-esteem, right? We've talked about that. And being able to inspire others is so important. And when we have been through something, releasing that trauma. So thank you for the long-winded answer. That was thank you.
You gotta get it out.
All right, let's move on to number 4. Are we on 4?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Jaden Blake. For this project, we are making a story, and it is important for us to make our stories impactful and meaningful. So our question to you is, what's one of the most interesting or memorable stories you've heard on your podcast?
It's funny, Brittany and I were talking about this before we got, because there's so many stories, but you go first, Brittany.
Okay. One of my favorites is called Carl's Angels, and it's so this guy named Carl, he has a lump on the back of his head that he notices one day, and he kind of ignores it, goes throughout his life, but it gets bigger, and he finally goes to the doctor and he finds out that it's a brain tumor and it needs to be removed. And around that time, he's going through a difficult breakup. He gets this tumor removed, and he's going through this healing process where he's like, you know what? Like, I want to just change my life. I want to be healthier. And he's hanging out with one of his friends who's a vegan, and she's looking at what he's eating. She's like, that's not healthy. And he's like, what do you mean? It's chicken and sweet potato fries. And she's like, nah, like, that's not healthy. If you're trying to be healthy, then you really got to do it. And she just started helping him like figure out like good vegan recipes, healthy alternatives, working out and being consistent. And she was just there to build him up. And so his whole story was just like how Black women are healers, and just showing like, and he had another Black woman friend who was just holding him accountable. And it was just this little community that he had that he was just like, oh my gosh, like Black women are healers. And he's just in his whole healing process, physically, but also mentally and emotionally.
Yeah, that was a great story. And one of my favorites it's called The Medicine of the Mind. And it's about this guy who lives in New York City, and he goes to Peru for the first time. And Peru is in South America, and they have, I guess it's like the indigenous community there has this drink that you can drink that's supposed to be like it's supposed to be a spiritual experience. It's called an ayahuasca. But when you take it, you can kind of like dream and have these trips, these like really trippy experiences. And so his story is him bringing us through that whole trippy experience. And he did it in such a way that like I felt like I was going through it with him. Like I've never been to Peru, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And so I felt like his ability just to share details and really paint a vivid picture of what he saw, what he smelled, what he remembered, how he felt, was really powerful in drawing like me in, even though we were producing the show, but he had me hooked just because he was so compelling in how he told the story.
Yes, so I listened to that story twice.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
It's so good.
Literally one of my favorites. And I really love the Carl's Angels because it kind of brings in, new ideas of health and healing, right? So, consider that, students, right? Like when we're writing our own stories, don't just think about COVID, right? Just think outside the box. And I just love the fact that it went from being, I think it was health to healing is kind of what I wrote. So, the concerns of health to healing. So just think about that journey of where you're going to take us and how you're going to take us there.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. All right, let's move on. Number 5.
You can hear me?
It's a little broken up. So just go ahead.
Can you hear me, Dojo?
A little bit. You're a little delayed, but just do the best you can.
Hey, my name. Okay. Hey, my name is Lakira. Our project asks us to create a narrative. What is a good story that you guys came up with? That you guys came up with that can help us come up with a good story.
Yes.
Okay.
Take this one, Brittany.
Okay. So what makes a good story is theme, I think. I think once you find your theme, it is easy to build your story around it. It's much easier. What also makes a good story is story arc. There has to be a journey. So everyone knows definition of stories, an event that happens. So something has to happen. That makes a good story. There needs to be a conflict and a resolution. One of the things that when we have storytellers come on, we're always making sure that the ending is not like a cliffhanger, or it's not like an almost story, which is like things happen, but there's no resolution. So you almost had it, and then it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So
or you kind of like avoid trouble. Like there are a lot of stories people try to tell where they almost get into something and then they happen to avoid it, and that's exhilarating for them. But it's kind of like it would be better if the actual thing happened, because that's more intriguing and interesting. So we call that an almost story.
Then it needs to have a story arc. There has to be a rising conflict, a rising action, have your clear conflict, and steps taken for the resolution. It's a nice story arc, beginning, middle, end.
We think of our stories similar, the way we think about our stories, we go back to our English classes when we were in middle school and high school, and you start with you have setting the scene, right? Where you kind of get in the beginning, you identify who the characters are, what time period are you in, kind of laying the land out. And then you have what we call a spark, which is what kind of sets off the story, right? It's like, this is what is going to let us know what the journey is. In Carl's story, the one that Brittany talked about, Carl's journey was, I have this brain tumor. I find out that I'm sick. So now that's the spark on his journey to healing. Then you have the rising actions, which are just like all the things that happen along the way as he's seeking out this healing journey. He's trying to get his health in order. He's trying to get his diet in order. He's trying to get his mind right. And,
like building blocks.
Yeah, the building blocks towards that. And then you have the climax. And y'all probably have heard about that. That's like the turning point, the epiphany. For Carl, that was really realizing oh my gosh, I look back all these months and I'm so much better. I'm a changed person, and I'm realizing it's all because of my friends around me and these women that have been holding me accountable and teaching me new ways to live.
Your climax is the most heightened part of your story. So when you think about in a movie format, if you think of a climax, it's like when Simba goes back to the Pride Lands. It's something about to happen. Then now we're at the conclusion. He's revved up, big thing, and now he has to go home. So this thing climaxes there can be a big reveal. It's just the height of when everything kind of reaches its peak. And now the next step is you gotta resolve it.
Right. And then from there, you kind of go into your resolution and your conclusion, and you can wrap up the story. So when we say conflict, we don't mean that there actually has to be a real conflict. It doesn't have to be like you're fighting with someone else or you're in an argument with someone else. It just means some sort of tension or there's like something at stake, right? So again, going back to Carl's story, he wasn't in conflict with anyone, but he realized he had a tumor. So if he didn't get himself healthy, his tumor could have grown. He could, and all those kind of things you don't know where that can lead. It's on his brain. So that's kind of like the tension or conflict. It's not necessarily.
There's an obstacle that you have to.
Yeah, it's more of an obstacle. Yeah, some sort of something where like there's something at risk. If this doesn't happen, what happens? Having that kind of really clear in your story makes that story just even more interesting and engaging.
Another good thing we like to tell our storytellers is a story is something extraordinary happens on an ordinary day. What makes this moment, this event, different than all the other days?
Does that make sense?
Makes all the sense, okay? I think it's exciting because these are all the words that you guys are dropping, they've all heard of from me, from other teachers. So it's like, I told you, it's not just from Miss Ojo. These are things that will happen and be echoed in life when you're sharing perspective. Like you guys said everything, okay?
It does carry through life.
Oh, one more thing. Make sure your details are just vivid. Just remember that we can't see what you want us to see. So you have to paint the picture for us. Yes. You got to make us see it.
And feel it and smell it.
Feel it, yeah. Put us there.
All your
right there. Describe your character, describe the scenery, describe the time, describe the feeling, the emotions. Like we want to experience that with you.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the juice. Every time I listen, I always feel like I'm in there with them. Like I get emotional. So whatever you guys are doing to guide, thank you for sharing that with us. This session will be recorded, so we'll hear it over and over again. So make sure we hear this, right? It's not just Ms. Ojo's class. This is something that's really helpful no matter what you really want to do. Being able to articulate yourself and bring people into where you are, it's a powerful skill. So thank you, ladies, for that.
Thank you. Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to question number 6.
All right, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So, hi, my name is Unique. We each have to tell a story under the topic Pandemic 2020. We have to create a story that is real or imagined. What are some words of advice to get started with this project?
So that's a great question. So how I go about creating stories, one, I have to choose my genre. Am I doing a drama or am I doing a comedy? And then from there, I like to use what I read, what I watch as influences. And because I'm very much I love writing for Black people, I always try to find the Blackness in what I'm like reading, what I'm seeing. I like history, so I'll read something, I'll be like, I'm sure Black people have went through this. I try to find the Black version. Or even if I'm just like seeing like a different story, I'm like, how would this affect a Black person if they were put in this situation? And then kind of base it and grow it from there. But I think the first thing is, what is your genre? And what are you trying to say? What are you trying to have the audience feel? And what does this story mean? Like what? You got to find the who, what, when, where, why. Why are you telling the story? What does this mean?
Yeah, for me, I like to think about what are the things that I'm not hearing, right? Like what's different than all the other things that kind of I'm seeing. So if I'm watching television and I see a lot of different things on similar topics, or I'm reading books, or I'm even online on Instagram and TikTok and stuff, I'm always thinking about, okay, whose voice am I not hearing? What perspective is not mainstream today or really popular? And that's what drives me, and that's kind of where I start. So I think to summarize what Brittany and I are saying is you really have to find what inspires you, what interests you, and you can start there. Is there a certain person? Is there a topic? that is interesting to you, and you can kind of start from there.
Yeah, there's a reason why people say write what you know, because you're going to enjoy it the most. You'll enjoy writing it the most, and we'll have fun expanding on it. You'll get more creative ideas on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are
Not even
really
like
good.
what you know, it's just what inspires you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I love that you started off talking about, you chose even your genre. Like, is it going to be drama or is it going to be comedy? Right? There's a lot of characters in this class, so you guys can definitely be creative about how you approach, even if it's horror, right? Like, just figure it out. But making sure that you really have those basic 5 Ws. And I love the idea of not making it a mainstream thing, right? Like, maybe you don't want to talk about the masks during COVID because that's a major topic. How can you grab us in with something that is underneath the surface? And I think it's really powerful to talk about what you know. That's really great advice. So don't try to reach for the stars or research something that you don't know. Talk about what you already know. That's a good basis. So thank you for that advice.
Yeah.
Let's go to number 7.
Hey, how you doing today?
Hi.
Hi.
Well, how are you?
Good. My name is Derek Waller. All right. As we think about our own stories and pandemic experiences, do you have any quick pandemic 2020 stories that you can share with us now?
Oh gosh. You go first, Martina.
Okay. Let me think. So my pandemic has been, New York had very strict shelter in place rules starting in March or April. Everything was closed. We had to stay inside, had to keep 6 feet if you were outside. Masks have been mandatory. So that was really scary for me in the beginning. Because New York City is very crowded. So if I did go outside to go to the grocery store, I feel like people weren't, close to me. But or too close to me, and I was like, I don't want to get sick. I don't want to get other people sick. But really, I think the part of the pandemic that was most memorable for me was when the pandemic kind of hit this racial justice movement that we're in right now. And we are seeing all these protests happening outside, and we were still kind of forced to stay inside. And we had this tension, this decision, like, what do I do, right? As a Black person, I want to go in the streets, I want to fight. But also as a Black person, we know that the infection rates and the death rates are, more pronounced in our community. So I don't know if this is a good story, but that was just something that was really memorable for me in that time of really trying to figure out how can I be most useful during this time? How do I get involved in the movement while also protecting my family, protecting my friends and me? And that was a really, and managing my own mental health at that time. Like, I was feeling a lot of anxiety, feeling like just the weight of everything going on. It was really hard for me to get through some days. So that was a very unique time for me that will stand out for a long time because I'd never felt all of that weight in that way before. And so I had to do a lot of work to kind of get out of it and to try to figure out how to move in this new normal.
Yeah, mine's pretty similar. For me, it was just trying to hold on to that creative energy when all this is happening in the world, because it is very traumatizing. It does weigh heavy on your mental health. And some days you're just like, you're just depressed. It's just a really sad time is going around, and it was just trying to figure out how to balance a good mental health and also being creative and using this anger, this hurt, this pain, and try to create something from it. I'm not and which was very new to me. I never had to tap into such pain that I'm feeling with all the police brutality and try to create something from it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I'm hopefully my students can steal these ideas. And so that I think Martina mentioned that COVID-19 plus racial tensions, that crossroad is when it really hit for you. and kind of asking yourself, how can I be most useful during this time while taking care of myself? And also for Brittany, it's like holding on to creativity, dealing with the depression, the anger, the pain, and finding a way to balance. And story unique for everyone. No one's gonna write the same story for them. So feel free to dig into those ideas as well.
Yeah.
So it looks
You
like
summarized that real well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
no problem. So I have these, I'm so glad we got to finish in time. I was like so worried that we were not gonna get to all these 7 questions, and we did. So I'm really, really grateful. At this time, I would love, if you have any last minute questions, if you saw one of the questions that you didn't see added to the list and you wanna make sure you ask that at this time, make sure you drop it in the chat and we'll read it out. And if not, Martina and Brittany, again, thank you guys so much for coming. Do you guys have any last words that you want to share with us?
Yeah. In addition to writing what you know, write what you want to see. How do you wish the media saw you? Because I feel like not every Black person feels seen, even though we're having a lot more representation of Black people in media today. But I know that a lot of people still don't feel seen. So how would you like to be seen in media?
Yeah, I think that.
Are there any specific ways on how we should write our stories?
Did you say, are there specific ways that you should write your story?
Yes, ma'am.
And what do you mean?
Basically, on like how we supposed to break down in key details of what's going on in the story.
I think a good place to start is to kind of think of your story in maybe 3 acts, like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, the beginning, the middle, the end. Once you kind of figure out what the genre is, what the theme is, what the story's about, who the characters are. Think about starting with, who's in the story, who's important to your story, whether if you're basing it off a true life story, whether it's your own family and friends, or if you're making it up, who are all the kind of players and what is important to them. I know some people like to start at the end of the story. They want to be like, this is how I want the end to look like, and they'll write backwards almost, like can kind of get to that end. Some people kind of start in the beginning and allow it to unfold.
Whatever like sticks out to you, whatever you can see very clearly, start from there, even if it's in the middle of the story, and build from there. When I start writing stories, what's helpful for me is I outline it. So I write everything that I can think of. And sometimes there's multiple bullets under a bullet where I'm like, these are other options that can happen. But I map that out, and then I outline each character and descriptions, just to have as like a reference of like, I know how I want it to end. I know how I want it to start. Now I just got to figure out the middle.
Was that helpful?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We see a question in the chat. Question, what is the most traumatic interview that you encountered? And secondly, what do you hope to hear when you all get back into the booth, if you do? And this is from Alan, and Alan is a writer, so he said this would be helpful for story development. I don't know, Brittany, and I have the same story, but the most traumatic story that I've had to encounter on the show is there was a mother who lost custody of her 2 daughters to her ex-partner who happened to be abusive to her. And it was traumatic just because that experience of ripping a family apart is traumatic, but also because she still didn't have custody of her children yet. And they were with a family that she didn't fully trust had her daughter's best interest at heart, or that were prioritizing her daughter's mental health. And so with stories like that, it's really important to not, for us to make sure that the person is ready to share their story, right? If they come to us and you can kind of tell like they're not at a place where they can tell the story without getting overly emotional, or you can just tell like it's very upsetting for them to recount it, then that's okay. It's like, we don't have to tell the story right now. Like, there's no rush. When you're ready, we'll be ready. But the second thing is making sure that we're not projecting what we want to hear onto her or onto the person, right? So allowing them to get out the story as they remember it in their own words, and really more so collaborating with them on what the story sounds like. A lot of times trauma victims feel like their voices aren't heard. And so we want to make sure that we give people the space to get it all out. And it's not something where we're like have a heavy hand over their story and what the story should be or should sound like.
Yeah, I don't really remember which one's traumatic. Yeah, I know that one was
Blanking.
Yeah, I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
But what was the second half of the question?
What do you hope to hear when we get back into the booth?
I know you want to take that one away.
Oh, cool. You don't have an answer?
I know you like telling this one.
I have answered. I have a lot of things I want to hear. I definitely want to hear from different kind of voices that we haven't featured as in depth on our show. I definitely want to hear from more like queer voices and queer people, more trans people on our show. We also really want to hear from people in other countries as well. I think there's something really cool about exploring the diaspora and hearing the ways in which we're different, but also the ways in which our experiences of Black folks might seem similar, depending on where you grew up in the world. I think there's a lot that we can like learn from each other in that way. So those are three voices that I'm excited. Yeah. Three kinds of stories of people that we want to feature.
Yes, same.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm like so excited. But thank you guys so much for coming to join us. This has been like, I'm so excited to look back at the recording of this and just capture all the highlights, because you guys dropped some jewels and just valuable things that we can really take away. So I just really want to say thank you. I really appreciate you guys taking the time out for us. I know I like reached out to you on a whim, and I'm just really glad that you guys really followed through with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, thank you for having us. This is really fun. It's nice. And if there's like, when the stories are finished, if we could, read them or see them, we'd love to see them.
Yes. So we're gonna create an anthology of some web-based anthology. I want the students to be as creative as possible. Some may be videos, some may be podcast-like, some may just be a full article. So hopefully we'll share them with you and you enjoy them.
Yeah, so excited.
Good luck, everyone.
Good luck.
All right, thank you guys.
Bye.